Welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News. I'm Nicole Randock, and thanks for joining us. We have a dedicated group of reporters covering public policy, law enforcement, the courts, and our state legislature. Here are some of our stories from our government and justice beat.
The Phoenix Police Department is looking to hire new heroes this year and is turning to a specific group of young adults to fill those roles. Cronkite News reporter Madison Stark takes a look into how these prospects fit the first responder mold.
The journey to graduate the academy and become a police officer can often be a difficult one. But for student athletes at Arizona State University, the pressure and responsibility this job presents is nothing out of the ordinary. To be a police officer, one must be both mentally and physically strong.
There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just, oh, we get to come out here and play volleyball. We have conditioning and we have lifting, and then there's the team bonding that goes into, building a strong team.
Two attributes student athletes at Arizona State University say they practice every day. In partnership with Sun Devil Athletics, the Phoenix Police Department has created a new push to recruit student athletes to their Police Academy training program. Officer Christopher McLeod believes the skills that student athletes possess can be directly translated to law enforcement.
We understand that your discipline as far as maintaining your school work and your physical fitness requirements for whatever sport you're playing would be a good asset for the police department to have as far as going through the academy.
The relationship between the Phoenix Police Department and Sun Devil Athletics was created through a program called Championship Life, a comprehensive effort focused on career readiness after graduation. Mia Rivera is a senior on the women's beach volleyball team at ASU who has transitioned through the Championship Life program.
I just love the idea of being in a profession that I get to help people and every day, especially stop crime from continuing, and that's just something so important in society.
For student athletes like Rivera, the transition to the police academy can be smooth.
We have at our access former players and relationships with the existing department just to say, hey, we got a student that's ready to trigger, ready to go. I'm going to hand them off to you, treat them right and let them know what the process is.
Since the introduction of the Championship Life program, nearly 30 student athletes have shown interest in transitioning into a career in law enforcement. In the Broadcast Center, Madison Stark, Cronkite News.
Also at the state capitol, House Bill 2586 remains in limbo as Arizona legislatures decide to bring it up to vote or not. Cronkite News reporter Alexis Burdine covered the bill and what it means for the LGBT community. Alexis?
If passed, the anti-discrimination bill would provide protections for the LGBT community in the entire state. I tried to speak with those on both sides of this issue.
With 1 day to go for a vote, the future of HB 2586 remains uncertain. Democratic State Representative Tony Navarrete is one of the legislators who introduced the bill.
This is a bill that many cities are asking for. We have cities already taking the lead on.
Those cities include Phoenix, Tempe, Flagstaff, Sedona, Chandler, and Tucson. But this would be the first time protections for LGBT members would be made a statewide law. When introduced, the bill seemed to have bipartisan support. However, it has one more chance to get a hearing in the House Judiciary Committee before the deadline to hear proposals. However, Chairman Representative Eddie Farnsworth from Gilbert said he would probably not grant it because he disagreed with the proposal. The Center for American Progress says that nationally, the cost of LGBT workplace discrimination is an estimated $64 billion. This number comes from the replacement costs associated with losing workers. And according to data from the Movement Advancement Project, 20 states and the District of Columbia have already passed similar laws prohibiting employment discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity.
When we look at states where we compete regularly for talent attraction and business expansion, the vast majority of those states have already updated their statewide policies.
We want to welcome all people to come and do business in Arizona. But when we do not want to even hear a bill that can really put Arizona in a much better light when we're talking about openness and diversity.
I tried to reach Representative Farnsworth numerous times and also talked to other legislators who may oppose the bill. But as of this broadcast, no one had responded. Friday is the deadline to vote on this bill. From the Broadcast Center, Alexis Burdine, Cronkite News.
U.S. Senator Rand Paul rallied Arizonans and reaffirmed his endorsement of Senate candidate Kelly Ward to replace Senator Jeff Flake. Reporter Amani Stevens takes us to the rally.
And there's only one person in this race that I will endorse, and that's Kelly Ward.
The rally gathered Arizonans in Scottsdale for Dr. Kelly Ward's plan for changes in Arizona.
We are not being served in the way that we as Republicans, as conservatives, as liberty lovers want to be served.
Also addressing the concern of the Second Amendment and gun control.
Kelly will be with us on privacy in the Fourth Amendment and the Second Amendment and the First Amendment.
With last week's mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, Ward says that the Second Amendment is under attack every day.
Law-abiding gun owners should not fear, because the solution to a bad guy with a gun are good people with firearms.
Ward has received support on the national level. On August 17th, President Donald Trump tweeted, "Great to see that Dr. Kelly Ward is running against Jeff Flake.
I want to secure the border and stop illegal immigration." Who wants to build the wall? Yes.
Ward's 5-part immigration plan also includes eliminating chain migration and the diversity lottery.
Number 4, we have to defund sanctuary cities. And number 5, we have to have that accountability piece for the employers.
Rise up, tell your neighbors, cheer Kelly on, knock on doors, give her money, and we'll get a real constitutional conservative. Thank you.
In Scottsdale, Imani Stevens, Cronkite News.
Ward takes on former Maricopa Sheriff Joe Arpaio and Congresswoman Martha McSally in the Republican primary. The primary election will take place August 28th. Current Arizona law says a convicted sex offender cannot live within 1,000 feet of a school or child care facility, but they can live next to their victim. Reporter Gabriel Gamino spoke with Arizona State Senator John Kavanaugh, who introduced a bill to make sure that doesn't happen.
My law is very simple. It simply states that a sex offender who victimized a child cannot move within 1,000 feet of that child's residence unless the child or the child's parents allow it.
Arizona State Senator John Kavanaugh introduced a bill to make sure that a sex offender cannot move in near their victim's home. The idea came after he read a newspaper article, but says it's all in the victim's best interest.
It's simply a matter of shielding victims of sexual violence as children from renewed trauma when their victimizer suddenly shows up and moves next door to them.
Right now, under Arizona state law, a convicted sex offender could move in next to their victim and face no legal challenges.
Professionals like Donna Lee Sarda, a behavioral health specialist, says that the bill is a good idea because it would prevent the victim from being re-traumatized.
If the victim sees the perpetrator, if the perpetrator gives a symbol, if they wear a particular cologne, and all of that could re-traumatize a victim and re-victimize a victim, and that we don't want.
Senate Minority Leader Katie Hobbs, who voted against it in the Senate, says she thinks it'll be a hard bill to enforce.
I don't know how you enforce this bill without having the perpetrator have the address of the victim. And that was my biggest concern. I think most of our caucus concern on the bill.
In Phoenix, Gabriel Gamino, Cronkite News.
Teen suicide is a growing epidemic that is plaguing schools across the state. Cronkite News reporter Madison Stark takes a look at how the legacy of one Valley teen is inspiring advocates to make a change in the Arizona legislature.
In just this 2017-2018 school year alone, 18 kids have died from suicide here in the Valley. I spoke with one family who's been instrumental in working to get a bill introduced to help schools improve training to spot students in trouble.
He just was a top-notch kid and top-notch person.
Tim Warnock speaks about his son Mitch, who passed away after death by suicide in October 2016. Mitch was a student at Corona del Sol High School in Tempe and was a championship pole vault athlete.
Incredibly hard worker, very dedicated to being the best that he could be, extremely competitive, very independent, fiercely independent, and that's probably part of what got him into a little bit of trouble.
Mitch's death is a part of an alarming increase in teen suicide throughout the state. According to a report by Arizona Child Fatality Review Program, Arizona has seen an 81% increase in child suicide rates since 2009. This problem, Warnock says, can be partly attributed to the lack of care schools show to kids in need of emotional help.
As parents and as teachers who see what the vast majority of teachers are doing and how much they care and how much they're going above and beyond, we just took for granted that there could be school environments that were heartless.
In January, SB 1391, more commonly known as the Mitch Warnock Act, was proposed. This bill would require school employees in all Arizona school districts and charter schools to receive training to spot the signs of suicidal behavior. Katie McPherson is an executive director at the Gurian Institute for Educational Consulting, who believes suicide prevention training is essential.
Things have changed. Kids are coming to school with some trauma, with some neglect, with some pretty heavy issues. And so part of being a teacher is sustaining and building that relationship.
Opposition for the bill includes questions about funding and overloading teachers with too much responsibility. However, State Representative Mitzi Epstein, supporter of Mitch's bill, feels such pushback is insignificant when it comes to saving lives.
I live across the street from a high school, and that high school has these stories happen far too often. And I am hurting from it, and my whole community is hurting from it. And when we can stop the hurt, let's do that. Let's stop the hurt. Let's save lives.
I would have traded everything to have him take that next breath. And I don't want another parent to have to endure that, or another set of high school friends to have to endure that, or their teachers.
The Mitch Warnock Act has been assigned to committee, but has not yet had a hearing. In Phoenix, Madison Stark, Cronkite News.
Here in Arizona, any bills dealing with gun regulations at the state capitol are now dead. Chairman of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, Republican Eddie Farnsworth, never put the bills on the agenda. But as Cronkite News reporter Cade Garner shows us, efforts to force a discussion failed.
Democratic lawmakers tried to delay the Committee of the Whole to discuss HB 2023, a bill to ban bump stocks. But Republicans voted to go ahead, skipping any discussion. Some, though, did feel the need to explain their vote.
This is not about the Second Amendment. This is not about a weapon. This is not about a gun. This is about an accessory to a gun that allows a weapon to fire hundreds of rounds a minute.
We have so cheapened life in this nation with video games of make-believe that tell our children it's okay to behave that way. Well, quite frankly, it's not okay. It's not okay for a kid to pick up a self-defense weapon and use it against other people.
The problem is guns. The problem are members on this floor standing up saying that we shouldn't take away, I think the term was a self-defense weapon. An AR-15 is not a weapon of self-defense. An AR-15 is a device used to slaughter.
I gotta be honest, I'm confused because we're talking about violence in video games. We're talking about what happened last week in Florida, which is just an awful, awful thing. And the bump stock has nothing to do with it. And with that, I vote no.
Today, we caught up with Representative Randall Freese, who sponsored the bill. He expressed disappointment in the lack of discussion.
When you're not doing something in a very public way, people that live here in Arizona think that we're doing nothing. And we are doing close to nothing, to tell you the truth, and we could be doing so much more if we just allow a discussion on these issues.
Freese says he won't give up, and we'll take a look at what may have a chance to pass next session. In the Broadcast Center, Cade Garner, Cronkite News.
Arizona could be raising its age requirements to get married. I spoke with Arizona State Senator Sean Bowie to see why he thinks state law should protect those who might not be able to protect themselves.
I think it's going to help a lot of young women.
Sean Bowie is one of the Arizona state senators behind Senate Bill 1139, a bill that would create a minimum age requirement for minors to get married in the state. Over half the states in the U.S. don't have an age requirement for marriage, most just requiring parental consent or a judge's approval, including Arizona. Just last year, Texas legislature passed a bill mandating a minimum age, and that's what Bowie says inspired this bill back home.
There are a lot of cases of young women, 15, 16 years old, being married to men who were much older.
The bill would set the minimum age to 16 here in Arizona and require those 16 and 17 to be legally emancipated, either through parental consent or proof of self-sufficiency. According to the clerk's office of the Maricopa County Superior Court, in the past 5 years, 570 minors have received marriage licenses in Maricopa County alone. That data shows some 17-year-old women marrying men 24 years older than them, something Jason Velcruz of the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence says can create tension and lead to marital issues.
Since sexual and domestic violence is something around power and control, if there is a relationship where one person is exerting more power and control over someone else against their consent, regardless of gender or age, then that creates an imbalance that could be potentially sexual or domestic violence.
Those Bowie say this bill will mainly affect young women.
If you're part of a family that wants you to get married at a young age and you're not really crazy about the idea, you have protections in law.
Bowie says this bill can create a first line of protection for those young women who can't protect themselves. We reached out to other counties for their marriage age data, but so far only Maricopa and Mojave counties gave us numbers in time for tonight's broadcast. Data from Mojave shows there were more than 130 underage marriages between 2011 and 2017.
The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, but that's the only constitutional right women are granted. As Emily Richardson reports, here in Arizona, women are still trying to get an equal rights amendment ratified in order to help fight against the pay gap and sexual harassment.
In 1972, the ERA was proposed as an amendment to the Constitution and sent to the states for ratification. Congress placed a 7-year time limit, and today it still falls 2 states short of ratification eligibility. However, women across the state believe granting equal rights in Arizona could still help put it in the Constitution.
People feel equal, and so they question why we need the Equal Rights Amendment, but equality is not a feeling.
Rebecca McHood, an advocate for the amendment and part of the ERA Task Force AZ, says working towards ratifying the amendment is important to her because she feels as if she is carrying on the legacy of her female ancestors.
Getting women equal protection under the Constitution, which we don't have, I feel like is a duty I owe to my great-great-grandmothers.
Representatives Pamela Powers-Hanley and Michelle Ugenti-Rita introduced an ERA bill this year.
Our protections, our being women's protections, should be protections the opposite sex has.
Of women and raise the equality and pass the Equal Rights Amendment in the state of Arizona.
But the bill has not made it through committees. Some feel since it had to have passed back in 1982, there's no point in pursuing it.
Every amendment that has gone through the gauntlet of the states has become an amendment to the Constitution, and you're not going to stop equal rights for women on a technicality.
It was an arbitrary time limit that was put, it was a sexist time limit that was put on passing the ERA.
Supporters of the bill are hopeful that if they do not stop expressing the importance of an ERA, Arizona lawmakers will eventually grant women equal rights.
We've seen the power of women's voices when they come together, when they speak up. 2 states isn't a lot. Arizona could be one of those states.
Hadley says that she is hopeful that it could get a striker and get it a hearing, and she is working to get it discussed on the floor. In the media center, Emily Richardson, Cronkite News.
This year's wildfire season is expected to be more dangerous than previous years. Reporter Sydney Eisenberg was at Governor Doug Ducey's news conference today and tells us what resources he's requesting.
This year, every fuel bed at every elevation in the state is my biggest concern.
The Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, the governor's office, and especially first responders are gearing up for an early wildfire season.
We expect this year's conditions to make the fire season
especially challenging.
Governor Doug Ducey says this especially dry winter makes this season different from previous seasons. The National Integrated Drought Information System shows 100% of the state is abnormally dry, with almost 10% facing extreme drought. At this time last year, only 55% of the state was abnormally dry. In order to prepare, the governor has requested more funds for fire prevention.
I've requested in our budget that we double our investment in fire prevention funding from $1 million to $2 million.
Governor Ducey is also asking Arizonans to help prevent wildfires by making sure all fires are put out cold, especially while camping, and making sure their chains are not dragging while they drive. In Phoenix, Sydney Eisenberg, Cronkite News.
The climate assessment program at the University of Arizona predicts that Southeast Arizona could see an increase to wildfire risk starting this month, with the rest of the state seeing an increased risk starting in April.
First responders, law officers, and emergency crews alike often face the unthinkable. A new bill in the state legislature aims to help public service employees struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Reporter Gabriel Gamino explains how the suicide of a former Phoenix police officer led to this proposal.
I don't care. Can you put a value on somebody's life?
Rebecca Tiger was married to Craig Tiger, a former Phoenix police officer who died by suicide in 2014. She says he didn't receive the proper help to deal with this PTSD after being involved in a fatal shooting in 2012, which is how HB 2501, also referred to as the Officer Craig Tiger Act, came to life.
And when I talked to law enforcement, they told me that PTSD is the #1 killer of cops. And so I thought we really should address that issue.
The bill makes several changes to current law. For example, it would increase the number of counseling visits an employer must pay for from 12 to 36. Additionally, it calls for the employee to receive full pay and benefits while they are in treatment, which has caused opposition from organizations like the League of Cities and Towns.
I've talked to the League of Cities and Towns, and what they tell me is this is just purely a dollars and cents issue.
In a statement provided to Cronkite News, the League said that no research has been done to show whether the current treatment process is effective. It goes on to say, quote, "The League continues to be sensitive to the issues and has suggestions on how to provide all the necessary treatment in a way that is responsible considering our stewardship of taxpayer dollars. Because of our financial position where police and fire make up the largest portion of city budgets, we should not legislate by anecdote. Any changes in this area need to be carefully considered and substantiated by facts and data." Boyer said he will continue working with stakeholders to make sure the bill gets signed. As for Tiger, she says that the bill would have helped Officer Tiger.
I think it would have made all the difference in the world. I believe wholeheartedly that he would still be here.
In Phoenix, Gabriel Gamino, Cronkite News.
The opening of Valor on 8th celebrated a community initiative to provide affordable housing for low-income families. Reporter Amani Stevens tells us how this complex is helping one veteran and his family.
Returning home from serving in the armed forces is not easy, and one of the most challenging aspects, finding affordable housing.
They come home to poverty, they come home to the streets.
Miguel Valencia served in the Arizona National Guard and says that veterans get overlooked.
Veterans kind of get the short end of the stick on a lot of things. Veteran is willing to lay down their lives for our freedom that we hold so dearly.
But this new housing development in Tempe could change that. Valor on 8th is a 50-unit housing complex, and the chief development officer for Save the Family says it's helping out in a very tight market.
For every 100 low-income families, there's only 26 units of affordable housing available to choose from.
Lopez says that 45 of the units are already leased out to low-income families. 13 of those include veterans, like Valencia.
It gives me something to raise my kids at perfectly, running around, going to different apartments, different houses, putting in applications. It's money that I know might not get back. The money that I put into here, it's already guaranteed.
We're able to provide this housing for them so that it's one less thing for them to have to worry about.
There's open areas where we can see our children. Our son, he is able to come and hang out, and he's still at home where he doesn't have to come walking home 5-6 o'clock at night from school or from the community center. He's home already.
and the Valencia family has been able to call Valor on 8th home.
Having a place where they can call home, just it's an amazing feeling to know that there's people actually caring about people that come back from the armed forces.
In Tempe, Imani Stevens, Cronkite News.
There's about a year-long waiting list right now for units at Valor on 8th. Pat Tillman and military appreciation are embedded in the blood of the Arizona State athletics community. New ASU football coach Herm Edwards got an up-close and personal look at one of the mainstays in the U.S. military. Reporter Tyler Paley was with Edwards for his flight of a lifetime.
There come the gear and the flaps.
That's Arizona State football coach Herm Edwards aboard one of the U.S. Navy FA-18 Hornets, otherwise known as the Blue Angels. The famous fighter jets made their way to Luke Air Force Base in Glendale this weekend for the annual Luke Days.
We go to every show site and we really try to inspire a culture of excellence and service to country and really represent the men and women overseas. And we try to get involved with the community and inspire the youth and our future of this country as well.
It didn't take much to convince Edwards to take part in this exciting event, because for him, it's more meaningful than just a spin in the air.
My father was in the military, 22 years, fought in the Korean War and World War II. I lived on an Army base when I was young in California, so I appreciate the service.
Lieutenant Andre Webb took Edwards up in his number 7 Blue Angel jet. Webb says he's logged about 2,300 hours in the air, while this was Edwards' first time on a fighter plane.
Imagine the first time you ever remember riding a bike and your parents teaching you how to do that, them explaining a lot of things to you that now you just take for granted, and it's very similar to that.
I can feel that a lot.
A flight Edwards will never forget, and one that's given him a greater appreciation for the service members overseas.
Freedom is never free, and I think sometimes we don't realize that. I realized that at a young age.
From Luke Air Force Base in Glendale, Tyler Paley, Cronkite News.
Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Cronkite News. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.